The National Weather Service is defending itself regarding the alerts that it issued and the timing of them. Christina Dahl, the vice president of Climate Central, addressed the role of staffing at NWS and other federal agencies and whether cuts are potentially impacting forecasts.
I think it's too early to say. I mean, we do know that the National Weather Service issued multiple warnings about flood risk, and so clearly they were getting messages out. They do have a vacancy right now in a critical position called the Warning Coordination Meteorologist, and so it could be that that vacancy had connections to local authorities who could have helped to raise the early warnings for residents. But generally, a weather forecast office for the National Weather Service has someone on staff 24 hours watching the radar to see what is happening in terms of precipitation, rainfall, other threats. And there are National Weather Service offices throughout the country that, because of staffing cuts, are no longer staffing their offices 24 hours a day. And so we need these critical people to be keeping us safe 24 hours a day in every one of these offices across the country. And the second piece of this is that staffing cuts at NOAA, or the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, more broadly, are threatening the future ability to forecast events better. Forecasting a storm like this one, where exactly is the heaviest rain going to fall? How is it going to translate from rain into flooding? These are extremely challenging problems scientifically, and it's the research of NOAA that enables us to improve our forecasts year over year so that we can more accurately pinpoint the warnings that need to go out to the public.
Now, the very reports designed to warn us of these extreme weather risks have seemingly disappeared. Legally mandated national climate assessments, long used by state and local officials to prepare for climate impacts, have been quietly removed from federal websites. The White House says the info will now be housed within NASA. Joining me now, the man who helped build this very system that's now being taken apart, John Holdren. He's the co-director of the Science, Technology, and Public Policy program at Harvard University's Belfer Center and a former science advisor for President Obama. Thank you so much for being with us on this holiday weekend. Let's start here. For viewers who might just be hearing about this, what exactly are these national climate assessments, and what does it mean that they've effectively vanished from federal websites?
Well, the national climate assessments of climate change impacts on the United States were mandated in a 1990 act of Congress, the U.S. Global Research Act of 1990. And they are supposed to be produced roughly every 4 years. Some have been slow, but on the whole, there have been 5 such reports produced. The 6th was recently canceled in midstream by President Trump. And the 5 previous ones, which were all posted on the U.S. Global Change Research Program's website, have disappeared for the moment. They may show up on the NASA website. We can hope so. But the whole fiasco is simply one aspect of a campaign by the Trump administration to dismantle large parts of the U.S. research establishment, and in particular, to dismantle every effort to better understand and predict what climate change is doing in the United States.
Well, John, help me understand this a little bit more. You've warned that suppressing this kind of information could actually increase the danger Americans face from climate impacts. How does that work?
Absolutely.
And what a horror story in Texas. The flash floods in Texas, the Guadalupe River, 51 missing, 51 dead, more missing. Children at a camp. And you know, when the president guts all of the early warning systems and the weathering forecast abilities of the government, these are the results that we're going to start to see on a daily basis because he's put this country in so much danger by his horrible, horrible decisions and this ridiculously immoral bill that he just signed into law. As Republicans cheered, people will die as a result, and they've started already. Shame on him. Shame on every GOP sycophant who's listening and following the disastrous decisions of this mentally incapacitated POTUS.
Yes, Trump does deserve blame here. I saw some right-wingers come into my comments and go into the comments on all the other posts on this, on other parts of social media, basically saying, oh, are we blaming Trump for the weather now? Well, like, no, we're not. But this crisis is exacerbated by Trump's failures. Look, the best of preparation, the best work you can do, tragedies are still going to happen. They have, they will, and they will in the future. And so, yes, people will lose their lives despite the best efforts of first responders and the government officials and funding structures and all that. But Trump made it actively worse. His cuts to scientists and first response has made it worse. So when the tragedy inevitably happened, instead of it being awful, it is incomprehensibly awful. And that is his fault. Not to mention that Donald Trump and his party are his party is chock full of climate deniers. And climate change is one of the reasons these things happen. And guys, it gets even worse here.
The bill that President Trump just signed into law has states across the U.S. grappling with what it means for them. My next guest is a Democratic governor of a red state. Here with me now is Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky. Thank you so much for being here. We do have a lot to get to, but I do want to start with the devastating news that we're seeing in Texas, because just a few years ago, you had more than 40 people die in your state. You had the worst floods in Kentucky history. What's your message to officials and residents dealing with this in Texas right now?
Well, to the people of Texas, Kentucky loves you. We know what you're going through. In July of 2022, we lost 45 Kentuckians, each one a child of God, to devastating flooding. What these families are going through right now is just pure hell. And what they need is the entire country to wrap their arms around them, to show them just pure love. And to everyone on the ground, we need your help in staying out of flooded areas so that first responders can get in. I know they're still searching for a lot of people. So we need to make sure that those in the boats and those in the helicopters have an unobstructed way to get to these places. And then think about what these families are going to need in the coming weeks, months, and years, and do everything you can to be there for them. We went through it in July of 2022. We went through it in February and in April of this year. So our heart really goes out to Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. Governor, I do want to turn to the giant bill President Trump signed into law, what it would mean for Kentucky. 1 in 4 Kentuckians are on Medicaid, 1 in 10 on food stamps. How many will lose their benefits because of this law? And what, as governor, can you do to help?
Well, this law is devastating. It's the single worst piece of legislation I've seen in my lifetime, and it is a congressional Republican and presidential attack on rural America. In my state alone, 200,000 people are going to lose their coverage. Those are 200,000 Kentuckians that deserve to see a doctor when they're sick. 20,000 healthcare workers are going to lose their jobs. And we've got up to 35 rural hospitals that are typically the second biggest employer in their communities that may close their doors. And what that means is our economy takes a huge hit. And then whether you have private insurance or Medicaid, if you live in rural America, you have to drive hours just to see the doctor that used to be in your community. It is awful. And that is before we even talk about the cuts to SNAP, which means that seniors and children will go hungry at night and wake up hungry in the morning. I cannot believe that Congress was willing to pass this. I mean, it's awful.
They did add about $50 billion for rural hospitals. You don't think that's going to help?
No, based on the massive cuts that are here, based on the fact that a rural hospital may have 40% or 50% of their revenue coming from Medicaid, this will not help to keep those doors open. And so what you're going to first see are rural hospitals cutting specialties. You may have to drive several hours just to give birth in many parts of this country. And just think about how the economic hit to these communities go. You lose 200 jobs from doctors and nurses and orderlies, and all of a sudden the coffee shop does worse. The bank doesn't have as many folks coming in. I mean, this is going to hit rural America right in the face.
Governor, this law adds work requirements for Medicaid on those who are able-bodied adults. Kentucky Republican Congressman Hal Rogers says adding these requirements, quote, protects the longevity of Medicaid benefits for our most vulnerable population and adds integrity and strength to Medicaid and SNAP assistance. One of the first acts of as governor, yours, was to end Medicaid work requirements in Kentucky. Why shouldn't people who can work? Well,
we want everybody that can work to work. And right now in Kentucky, we have the most people working, the most jobs filled, and the largest workforce in our history. And that is with our current Medicaid structure. That's because these work requirements really aren't about getting people back to work. They are about increasing the paperwork on everybody. That's the senior, because 70% of our long-term care costs are covered by Medicaid. And that's children as well, with half of Kentucky's kids covered by Medicaid. These work requirements aren't just for specific people. Everybody else has to check all the boxes saying they're not able-bodied. And what happens is when somebody misses that one box, they are kicked off for 6 months or more.
Governor.
Meaning families have to take that parent or grandparent in. It means they have to cover all those other costs. All this is more red tape meant to kick people who should get Medicaid off of Medicaid.
Governor, I just asked that very question to the Treasury Secretary about the increase in red tape, and his response is Democrats think poor people are stupid.
It's amazing. Listen, I know a lot of people on Medicaid. These are our parents with special needs children that could have never covered it otherwise. These are busy people, all working 2 jobs already to support that child. And now, if they miss a deadline, if they miss checking a box, look at what happens. I mean, you can lie all you want about what's in this bill, but the numbers are the numbers, the predictions by the Congress.
Look, you could see, right? Like, this is how you're supposed to respond. But Donald Trump doesn't have the integrity or professionalism or competence or sanity that Governor Beshear has. And so this is why leadership matters. Like, look, the Republicans, I don't want a Republican in power because they have bad policies. Heck, I mean, most of the Democrats have insufficient policy. Again, all the Democrats not backing Mamdani now. I don't trust them particularly either. But Republicans universally have bad policy. Full stop. Even the good ones like Liz Cheney, awful on policy, right? But leadership matters too. And when Trump was chosen by the Republicans, they chose a man that not only is ideologically evil and does things out of hate, he does not have the competence to be a leader when the people need him.